love energy is a kind of a field. And I think a lot of times this sort of connectivity occurs between mothers and their children, and situations where there is a very deep love. So I like this idea of a morphic field. And the guy the British neurologist who discovered brain waves right after World War I, his son was in battle in France, and he was very close with his sister, and his sister woke up one night and she had a dream that this fellow's son had been killed. And she told her father, it turned out to be true. And then he spent the rest of his life thinking, there's something about this that is not just, it didn't just happen. There's something going on. There's some level of connection, of energy that's going on there. And so he's the guy who discovered brainwaves. And I think you got to take that into account. A lot of times, these deep connections that we have do in fact yield amazing premonitions.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the TruthSeekah podcast. I'm your host, TruthSeekah. Today, my guest is Stephen Post. Stephen, welcome to the podcast, brother. How are you?
How are you, Truth? Good to be with you.
Great. Good to have you, man. Excited for our talk today, and been watching some of your TED Talk stuff and checking out some of your other interviews, and I know that it's going to be a great discussion.
I'm sure it will be, with you especially.
You're a well decorated individual, doctor. You have so much under your belt. You do a lot. You bring a lot to the table, and so you talk about a lot too. So maybe share just a little bit of your background, what you bring to the table, who you are, what you do. We can start there. And with that being said, where you want to go with the interview, because again, there's so much that you do bring to the table, and I'm sure that all of it fits into the grand scheme of this talk as well.
Okay, well, thanks, Truth. I'm actually located in Stony Brook, which is a town on the north shore of Long Island, looking out over Connecticut. It's about an hour due east of Manhattan. I've been here 13 years, but I'm not really a New Yorker. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I kind of identify with the spirit of Ohio, and taught there at a medical school for 20 years, Case Western. Raised our family. We've got 2 kids in the suburb of Shaker Heights, which is a really nicely integrated place. And Long Island here is okay. It's a little remote in some certain respects, because it's hard to get through Manhattan to get into New Jersey or Pennsylvania, or to drive back to Ohio. But at Stony Brook University in the medical school, I direct the program in Bioethics and Medical Humanities. I'm the president of the Institute for Research on Unlimited Love, which is www.unlimitedloveinstitute.org. And we study spirituality and a higher form of love, not the love of designer jeans or even the love of chocolate, but something that's much more profound and even mystical than that. And we've been at it for now, believe it or not, 21 years. And there was a wonderful philanthropist named Sir John Templeton, who had sold his Templeton mutual funds, and he got in touch with me, and he said, why don't we start something to study the highest human asset, which is love. But then he said, but not just human love, the love that made humans. Okay. In other words, the love underlying the universe. He was really quite remarkable and very into quantum physics, and thought that we really didn't know much at all about ultimate reality. But he certainly felt that there was an underlying energy of pure love that explains the universe and everything in it.
Would that be what many from a religious tradition, not just for them, would call the love of God? God's love, or God is love, as the scriptures say, something like that?
Yeah. The Christian tradition, that would be good, but you could refer to this as the supreme being in the Hindu tradition that exists before.
Brahman?
Absolutely, Brahman would be just fine. And there are lots of other ultimate reality is a popular expression in Buddhism, but it's all the same, and it refers to this original mind and original heart, which is manifest in the energy of pure unlimited love, and that actually is prior to matter, mind before matter, not matter before mind. And that energy is the ultimate reality of our universe. And it dwells within us as well in the form of a certain sort of spark of eternity.
So good. Before we go a little bit further, because we want to, definitely break that open and stuff. And but what is bioethics? What does that mean?
Okay. Well, so the Institute is my night job. Bioethics is my day job. In other words, in medical centers, there are so many questions that come up about how people should be treated. Sometimes they're overtreated, sometimes they're undertreated. All the kinds of dilemmas that come up literally every day. Who should address these choices? How should they be addressed? Where does ethics fit in? Where does law fit in? These are very complicated matters, and every major hospital has an ethics committee, and they have ethics consultants who are available round the clock for calls from physicians and even patients themselves directly when there are disagreements, misunderstandings that could benefit from an impartial hearing. And so we'll go visit and do a lot of things for people. But also we have an educational role with the medical students. Not only bioethics, quote unquote, what do you do with a 22-month-old premature baby who's probably not going to make it? Do you try or not? Those are dilemmas. Do you use a feeding tube on a 90-year-old guy who's got terminal dementia? I would probably not want that, but that's the sort of bioethical debate. But there's also medical humanities. We do a lot of work with music and literature, short stories, poems written by people who are ill, and as they try to explain what their experience of an illness is like. And we do a lot of training in communication, things like empathy and compassionate care and attentive listening, and try to allow students to go through a kind of process of identity formation so that they come out not just being technically proficient, but also being virtuous, humble, honorable, kind, and so forth.
So that's what I was going to ask you, and it sounds like that work in bioethics translates over into the universal love work. Does your training in that translate over?
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to have a couple of things going in your life, and the Institute is great. We're always doing things that are very creative with researchers around the world, but the actual practice of raising compassionate physicians is a very down-to-earth and very important operational approach to increasing love in the world. So my center is called the Center for Medical Humanities, Compassionate Care, and Bioethics. And they actually tolerate me really well here. It's just a big old state university, but it's not in any way religious, but people tend to be pretty spiritual. They have all kinds of practices. They do a lot of mindfulness meditation and, all kinds of stuff. It's really quite interesting. It's almost a new agey type place.
Yeah. When you're focusing on love and you look at these practices, and my study of the Bible, it looks new agey, right? There's this engaging with a mystical love, if whether that's through analogies and through metaphors and through mindfulness and through, I mean, I've watched some of your lectures about giving. It is better to give than to receive. And if you give, it's going to be by default given back to you. There's all of these different mindfulness practices, that tend to be lovey-dovey, hippie, like, new
Yes.
agey, that are ancient. And the reason I love these conversations is because, I feel like there's this place where religion and science meet, and they're starting to complement one another versus
Yes.
fighting and disproving and get rid
Right.
of your myth and analogy and stuff like that. But you see where the two kind of complement one another, right?
Yeah, very much so. And um, that's an area of tremendous importance. It's internationally powerful and growing all the time. So it's no longer a matter of belief versus unbelief, but really it's understanding that some of these great truths have a lot of scientific backing. And by the way, I also think, just listening to what you said, which was so thoughtful, Truth, thanks. The ways in which we should be able to connect a lot of the mindfulness techniques and the meditation and some of these Eastern mystical ways of viewing things, how we should be able to absolutely connect that with Jesus. And I've always wondered my own self, as of others, what happened to Jesus between the ages of 12 and 29? Because in the Bible, there's nothing on that.
Yeah.
It just says he grew, and you might assume that he was a heck of a good carpenter, and I love carpentry. There's nothing against that, but there are places in India that actually have shrines to Jesus. He's called Lord Issa.
Mm-hmm.
And people who think that they actually called Jesus in some areas of India, including Chennai in the south part, the traveling Messiah.
Mm.
And even in the Bible, he goes with his dad. Joseph is a dreamer, has a lot of mystical dreams, like Joseph in the Old Testament, and he says, hey, we got to get out of here. We're in trouble. Herod's coming after us. So they go to Egypt. That's a pretty long trek. And there were trade routes to India. And there are those who have argued with some degree of plausibility, but it's not ironclad, it's not tight, that Jesus may have actually gone to India. But if so, it's kind of interesting because it opens up a dialogue that we could really have.
Yeah. And it does, and I'm with you. Like I get that question a lot, where was Jesus between these ages? Did he go to India? And obviously I don't know, right? I do know when he was a child from 0 to 12, 13, before his bar mitzvah, before they come back to Passover,
Yeah.
that he escapes to Egypt. And so Egypt has the traditions of the mystery schools and all of that. So I kind of go that route, but the India route is huge as well. There's a huge connection with the Bible and
Yes.
those texts as well. So we can get into all of that. I think that this would be a good segue to your book and talking about synchronicity, because
Yes.
you at 15 had a dream
Mhm.
that you followed. It was supernatural, metaphysical kind of dream that you grew into. You saw a vision of what was to come for your life and what you would become, linking that back to Joseph, who had a dream about the Messiah and about his child and even what to name the child and all of this kind of stuff, right? So God, or the divine spark of love that speaks through everything, including dreams. Do you want to set that story up for your dream encounter to be doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, and Joseph and his brothers too, right? I mean, he was interpreting all these dreams.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Josephs are pretty dreamy people.
for sure.
Uh, but yeah, so I was a kid. I grew up actually in New York, and I went to a high school up in Concord, New Hampshire. And I was only 12 years old. And I was a little bit different than some of the other kids up there. It was a pretty intense place academically. They played a lot of ice hockey. I wasn't a hockey player, but I read a lot of philosophy and a lot of sacred scriptures from the world's religions, even as a pretty young kid. And we all took a sacred studies course and world. It was great. It was a great place. When I was 15, I had an interesting dream. I was not a big dreamer. I didn't have too many dreams. I mean, every once in a while, I still will have a dream, but I don't know if it amounts to anything. But when I was 15, we had to go to chapel every morning. And one morning I wasn't quite asleep and I wasn't quite awake. And I had this kind of dreamy vision type experience of a road that was leading to the west. It was covered with this really, really thick mist, so I couldn't see very far in front of me. And as I was walking down the road to the left, I just made out vaguely the image of a young man with long, dirty blonde hair, and he was just leaning out as if to jump. And then into the dream came the face of what looked to me like something of an angel, though without wings, but with great warmth and love. She said, "If you save him, you too shall live." And then all of the mist disappeared and blue broke into the dream, and that was it. I didn't know what that was, but I went to chapel that morning and I sat on my wooden pew and I thought about it for a while, and I probably would have dropped it entirely, but the same dream recurred 6 times over the course of a year. And I thought that was really weird. And I told my friends about it, and we talked about it in class. And my sacred studies teacher was an Episcopal priest named Rod Wells. He even drove me down to Yale Divinity School in New Haven to talk about it in a class on adolescent spirituality with a guy who was really a kind of a Jungian theologian. And they asked me about it. They said, "Were you feeling well?" I said, "Yeah. I mean, I hadn't had any dyspeptic hot dogs. I hadn't been working off a lot of demerits in the hot sun, raking leaves. I was in pretty good shape." But this dream was very powerful. And they said, "Well, did you do anything as a result of it?" I said, "Yeah, I actually, although none of the kids from my school usually went west for college, I said I applied to Reed College in Portland, Oregon, because it was kind of a little bit of a far out place, and they were surprised by that. And they said, "Does anybody else up there think about what you experience?" And I said, "Well, they all read Emerson's idea of the oversoul, and it's a beautiful piece of literature, but I actually believe it. I believe in this one mind, this original mind. I call it original mind, that is really the essence of the universe, and we actually are connected with it. Each of us, we have the gift of that mind. I don't think it's that mind is just derived from matter. I think that maybe the opposite is true. I think that maybe matter is derived from some sort of ultimate mind, and so we all have some connection with that. It's all part of us. And so therefore we can have premonitions, we can have these feelings of deja vu, we can have all kinds of experiences of intense creativity. Ramanujan in India, the guy whose notebooks are in the middle of the major library at Cambridge University, he was just a young kid. He'd be praying at the foot of his goddess in Chennai, and he'd, with his finger, write these formulas that he'd received in the dirt. Then he'd come back a little later, he'd put them in a notebook. And that notebook, which is in Trinity College at Cambridge University, in the middle of the library, is the basis of most of quantum physics. So, and they brought him to Cambridge when he was, 20 or 21 years old, because no one could believe the stuff he actually wrote a couple of articles about just really his dreamy revelations. And they asked him to prove things. He didn't think he had to prove anything because, they were gifts.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was brilliant. He died pretty young. He died when he was about 30-ish or so. But people have these amazing creative moments. And that includes people like Einstein, who would go into these sorts of deep mystical thought states. He called them Gedanke, and he would see things and intuit things. He was not so much rational as he was intuitive. And so, that suggests that maybe really exceptional creativity isn't just our own action and our own brilliance, quote unquote, but rather it's something that we kind of pick up from the world around us. And so my dream, I didn't know what the hell it was, and I wasn't a big believer in it. But that 2 summers later, I was home and I was going to go to Swarthmore College, and I'd gotten a job in the Bronx, and admittedly a little bit of a tough neighborhood, and I was going to do some tutoring because I like to do that with kids. My mom and dad, they completely rejected this idea. They said, "You're going to get killed." Yeah, okay. So we fought about that for a couple of days, and finally my mother said, "If you insist on this, we're not going to help you with your tuition." And I said, so what am I going to do this summer? What am I going to do for a job? And my dad said, "I got a job for you. You can work for Bill DeBono in his lampshade factory in Patchogue," which is this pretty miserable town on the South Shore of Long Island. So lo and behold, I took Dad's very secondhand gray Mercedes 190, and I drove it to Patchogue. He had another car. I drove it to Patchogue, and I worked in a lampshade factory for those 2 weeks, cutting cardboard between 2 really large, wonderful Italian women. I had no problem with that. But it just wasn't my thing, because I was also reading Siddhartha. I was reading about the Buddha all the time. This was like not my destiny. So I drove out one Friday night after a couple of weeks to West Hampton Beach, which is kind of a hangout for young people. And I had some friends out there from school. And about 11 at night, I decided, a lot of arguing in my family right now. I'm not really happy about this job thing. I'm going to follow my dream. I'm just going to drive to the West. So this is kind of shocking and maybe a bit of a confession, but I just took that Mercedes, and I had maybe $50 in my pocket. I had my classical guitar. I had a few items of clothing, and I had a few books like The Perennial Philosophy and Siddhartha, and I just drove west. So I drove all the way into New York.
Like all the songs tell you to do.
Like they all do. And I drove across the George Washington Bridge, and there was a sign. There were 2 signs. One said 95 South, but that wasn't in the dream. There was another sign that said 90 West. 90 is like Route 10, down where you are. It goes all the way across the country. It's one of the 4 cross-country highways. So I said Route 80 West. So I got on that road and I just drove west. And about 5 a.m, I was returning to a normally rational state. And I determined that, I should really do a turnaround on the midway and go home, return Dad's car, and my reputation will be untarnished. However, and this to me was the work of this infinite mind, call it Alchemy 101. I did ultimately take a course called Alchemy 101 with Steve Jobs at Reed College, but that's for another discussion. So I just as I was about to turn around, the generator broke down, and cars back in those days had generators. And if the generator broke, all the lights were gone, the engine was completely gone. And I just managed to get over on the right shoulder, because there were a lot of trucks early in the morning and it's kind of dark, it's dangerous. So I got over on the right shoulder and I looked all around. This was actually the Lewisburg exit. There were no car, no telephone booths, no lights, nothing, just fields. And so I did the only thing I could think to do at the time. I thought, well, this must be this ultimate reality wanting me to go west, because I was going to turn around and go east, but I went west because the car broke at just the right time to make that happen. So I wrote a note to which lives in my family's memory to this day. I took a piece of paper out of the glove compartment, and with pencil, I wrote, to the Pennsylvania State Police, please return this car to Henry A.V. Post, 44 Davison Lane East, West Islip, New York, 516-669-5655, from his son, Stephen, who's no longer working in the lampshade factory. That was bad. But I put my thumb out, had my little bunch of gear, and I got a car. I got to ride in a big white truck that felt very much like From on High. And anyway, I won't go into it, but eventually I wound up at the West Coast. And here's where the dream comes back, because my cousin George was a graduate of North Carolina Chapel Hill in Chinese studies. He'd done 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. The second one was actually in Laos, and he did some pretty bad stuff up there. He was a good guy, and he was older than me. So he had an apartment in the Mission District in San Francisco, which now is very gentrified, but then it was a pretty dangerous place. And I spent the summer with George. I slept on his floor. I played my classical guitar, Tarrega, Taroba, all that stuff, in Hispanic restaurants, made pretty good money. But I also joined a temple, a Buddhist temple, the Nichiren Shosho temple, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And I enjoyed that. It was kind of like getting lost, getting beyond space and time. It was total flow. And as it happened that summer, I probably would never have gone to college. I decided I didn't need it. But that's what Jobs decided when he went off to India to that ashram. But I decided that I did need it because I got a really bad draft number. They were doing this thing with your birthdays, and I was headed for Vietnam, and I wasn't going to do that. So I called Reed College because I'd already turned them down, and I said, "Do you have a space for me?" And they said, "Yeah, we'll do that." They didn't necessarily want me to go over there either. And so one morning in early September, I was at the corner of Mission and Chenery Street, and there was a Nichiren Shosho Buddhist temple right there where I'd been frequenting. And cousin George, this old Japanese American guy named Gus, and some other people were there. And they knew I was leaving for Oregon. I had my stuff. They gave me something that is called a go-home zone. You can kind of Google it, go-home zone. And it's a Japanese scroll. It's got a lot of symbols. Like one symbol is universal mind. There's a symbol for kindness, which is basically a heart, and lots of other kind of really beautiful things. And so they gave this to me, and I thanked them. They explained some of the symbols to me. I put it in my backpack, and I took the Market Street bus up to Golden Gate Park. And it's early in the morning. It was like 7:30 in the morning or so. And I walked across the park, and I walked up the rocky entranceway to the bridge on the left side. And I couldn't see more than about 2 feet in front of me because it was so foggy. And I got about halfway up the bridge to the middle of the arc, and I heard a little scratchy sound. And I looked to my left, and I squinted, and I kind of made out some guy who looked a little bit like the fellow in my dream, who was just leaning out about to jump. And I looked at him, and I said, "I truly hope you don't plan to jump." And then he was shocked because he didn't expect anybody to invade his privacy. So he screamed crazy at me, like from Macbeth, "Life is empty nothingness." He was actually a pretty intelligent, thoughtful guy, but maybe he was really drugged up. I don't know what was going on. So I told him, "Look, don't jump, because I have a feeling that I came all the way across the country just to be here to meet you." And then he really started cussing, because he thought I was crazy. I said, well, you're out there on the ledge. I'm at least on the walkway, and, and so I explained to him in about a half an hour, the whole story of the dream, of everything that had happened, of Dad's car on Route 80, of Cousin George, of all that had happened. And he actually quieted down, and he took an interest in what I was saying. And I said, look, I got a little bit of a deal for you. I'm going to give you something that's going to change your luck. Because, Buddhists, they have a lot of good luck charms and things, that you can pick up. So I said, I've got a Cajon zone. I hardly knew what a Cajon zone was. I've got a Cajon zone. And if you step over the fencing from the outside and step onto the walkway, I'm going to give this to you. So he actually did that. He actually walked over the railing, and he was standing there next to me. His name was Harry. I unscrolled the Cajon zone, and I tried to explain it as best I could. But mainly I said, I'm going to give this to you, and it's going to really turn your life around. And so for some reason or another, he actually kind of believed me. And I mean, I guess I didn't know if I believed it or not, but he walked south on the bridge toward the park, and I walked north. We're both going, we're right at the center of the bridge, so we're both going down. And I waved goodbye, and he waved goodbye, and I gave him a note that was to Cousin George, and gave George's address, 6 Chenery Street. George, this is Harry. Please let him sleep where I was sleeping on your floor, and take him to the temple, and let him meet Gus, and see if you can help him get together. And that's a long story there. It happened, actually, Harry turned out okay. So I went up to Oregon. I got a ride in a truck right at the base of the bridge, a small truck, just like a Ford Ranger or something like that. Got all the way up to Oregon. And as I was walking down that bridge in that beautiful sunny, it was like a radiant blue sky. I mean, all the mist disappeared. It just evaporated in the heat. And it was like the light was so intense. And I felt, this is so much what I experienced in the dream. I wasn't 100% sure, but I just felt that somehow maybe, even though I had that dream 2 years earlier, right? So 2 years earlier, and 3,000 miles away. So, San Francisco to Concord, New Hampshire is a long haul. So I said, somehow, I had that dream, and it came true. How could that possibly happen? So I started really thinking. That's why I was taking courses like, Alchemy 101, but I didn't know what the second half of the statement meant from that voice, which was, if you save him, you too shall live. And then I'll wind this up here. That's, this is sort of the journey story, although my whole life's been a journey. So it was like late January, and in Portland, Oregon, it does not snow much. I mean, this can be a little bit, but it does rain a heck of a lot. It rains almost all the time. And on any cold evening, it can get very slushy. So I'm sitting in the coffee shop, and the student coffee shop, with a bunch of people. And a guy comes bursting through the door. It's about 9 o'clock at night. He says, my name's Andrew, and I've got a brand new Harley Davidson Shovelhauser bike, which was like the fastest bike of its time. And who wants to go for a ride? And like a crazy kid, I said, I'll go for a ride. So I followed him out into the little parking lot, and I got on this motorcycle. He was pretty wired. He looked like he was maybe lit up. I don't know. And I shouldn't have done that. But anyway, I got on this bike, and there was slush on the ground, and he took off. And he hit about 80 miles an hour within a minute. And he went through every stop sign, every light, and eventually got out to the Pacific Coast Highway. And he was going south on the highway, hit 180 miles an hour, and he was slip sliding away. I mean, it was really dangerous. And I thought my time was up. I really thought this was it. I was crying. I was grabbing hold of this guy. He had a black leather jacket on. I said, look, you gotta let me off this. I think I can't take it. But he was just laughing with the rain beating into his face, And then, believe it or not, after about an hour, he did this U-turn over the Midway, which was like kind of like Evel Knievel, that sort of a thing, and just sliding all around. We started going north again toward Portland, and he actually dropped me off exactly where he picked me up. And I was like staggering. I couldn't even walk. And I just sort of managed to make my way over the ravine. There was a bridge, and then the dormitories were on the other side of the bridge. So I made my way over to Ackerman Dormitory, which is where I live. And that's actually where Jobs sometimes slept on my floor. And I got in there, and I never answered. There was a payphone on the wall. Now, look, back in those days, there were no cell phones, okay, or any white devices. Steve hadn't invented them yet. So I walk into the common room through the door, and I hear the phone ring on the wall, and I never answered that phone. I mean, my mom and dad, they could not get a hold of me for a month of Sundays. So somehow I felt pushed. I mean, I didn't see anything pushing me by any means, but I felt an energy just compelling me to, intuitively and even with a certain warmth, to pick up the phone. So I went over and I picked up the phone. I said, hello. And it was my mom. Now, you got to figure, it's about 11 at night Pacific time. So it's like 2 in the morning in New York. And my mom, she says, oh, Stevie, thank God you're alive. I had this terrible dream. I was sweating. I was fearful. I woke up your dad. I thought you were dead. I thought, are you okay? And I said, Mom, I'm okay, but I thought I was dead too. And we had a beautiful, mother-son conversation. It was really a kind of a reunion, and from that, I figured that, well, again, she was 3,000 miles away at the time, and she had this dream, and she knew that something was really perilous in my life, and somehow I'd gotten through it. So that's, to me, kind of what the second half of the statement meant. If you save him, you too shall live. That somehow I lived through that, and I probably shouldn't have lived through it because it was really treacherous.
Man.
But that's sort of, so what I'm talking about is the way we're more connected. Synchronicity is that idea that we're much more cherished and connected, not necessarily at all times, but there is this way in which encounters are set up, and our minds are much more universal than we realize, and we can have these experiences, and we don't want to just write them off and dismiss them. And so that's why I wrote God and Love on Route 80, because I wanted to express that side of my life, even though I've been working in medical schools for the last 40 years.
Wow. Yeah. Things were laid out. Your plan, your destiny was written before you got here, and you're just stepping into it because of your choices, right? Like you have to make those choices, and then the dream makes you cognitive of the choice. Like, hey, this is a choice. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to stop and help this man. He could be an angel in disguise, right? Versus you not doing it. So I wonder, it's like, here's the weird thing. Like, I feel like, I don't know if everybody has, this type of life planned out. Maybe they do. But the people who have those experiences and they don't think twice about them, like they have the dream, and they see, they have all of this stuff going on, all of the signs and symbols, but it doesn't mean anything to them. Like they couldn't sit here and say, yeah, well, this is how it happened. Bop, 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 bop. They're just kind of like going through the motions, it would seem like, and nothing is magical, nothing is spiritual. But you're a student, you were studying all of this stuff and aware of your dreams and talking about, divinity and things like that when you were just a kid. Do you think that some of this stuff opened you up to a state of awe and wonder? But at the same time, you had kids in your same class that probably, or those kids that are just, it was they don't think twice about it when they go home. They don't wrestle with God and love and angels and my plan and stuff. It's this idea of wrestling and who would take it and who would unfold it and figure it out kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and so For me, I mean, I have to say that, at first I just didn't, I wasn't a great believer in this dream at first. I mean, it's one of those things that I thought it was really uncanny, and I couldn't figure out how I could have had it repeatedly. That if anything ever meant anything as a dream, this had to be it, because it was the exact same dream.
Hmm.
And yet, even with my friends, I discussed it, and we said things like, well, hey, every kid seeks meaning. Everybody wants meaning in their life. So we're really good at making it up because we're desperate for it. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, we really talked it over. And
Hmm.
um, some of my friends, I mean, Charlie Scribner, whose dad ran Scribner's books and stuff. I mean, a lot of conversations about this that were pretty meaningful. And yet, still, I wasn't sure about it. Um, Really, it was that night in West Hampton Beach when I thought, hey, this is somehow a perfect setup. Like, my mom and dad are both so pissed off at me. and I'm so pissed off because I didn't want to be working at Bill DeBono's lampshade factory
Take this
cutting
job and
cardboard.
shove it. Yeah, trust me. Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
You. I mean, you're studying alchemy. You're in the alchemical process of like something's got to give, and you're
Yeah.
like in this place of desperation, which is where miracles happen.
Yeah. So there was a push. The push was all the stuff going on at home and working in the factory.
Yeah.
And the pull was, hey, I had this dream and I was never sure what to do with it. I'm
Yeah.
going to follow it. That was the moment of choice. And and then when I'd never driven actually over the George Washington Bridge before. Um, so I didn't know what would be there. But as soon as I saw that sign, Route 80 West, I just knew that was where I was going. And, you know, the the uh, the note to the police, all that stuff. By the way, I mean, I eventually I rode with a VW van full of hippies, part of the way out west, and we got to Lincoln, Nebraska, and one of the girls in the van said, you should. I told them my story. They said you should really call your mom. So they pulled over at a phone booth, and I called collect. I said, I called collect. My mom picked up the phone. That was the first time she said, "Oh my God, you're alive. We can call off the Pinkertons." Do you know who the Pinkertons are?
Mm-mm.
They're detectives. Okay. And I said, Mom, when you called the Pinkertons, why didn't you get my note? That was so bad. You got my note. I'm okay. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, I felt that as I went on in the dream, and then when I was on that bridge, it was really very much like what I had seen. It wasn't identical, but it was very much the same. And the guy I saw, Harry, he had the sort of snarly, long blonde hair, and he just, I told him he looked an awful lot like a kid I'd seen in a dream. And then when I walked down, north on that bridge, suddenly everything opened up in this beautiful blue, and I thought, wow, uh, this is all what was supposed to happen. I mean, I really felt that way, and that feeling grew. So actually, from the time I left the Golden Gate Bridge, I never really doubted the idea of one mind. There's a great writer named Larry Dossey who wrote a book called One Mind, a book on premonition and prayers, and he wrote the foreword to God and Love on Route 80, which was so nice of him. He's a great physician too, and I just felt from that moment on that the main thing is that our minds are a gift. We all have this capacity to connect with the one mind, the
Yeah.
original mind, and we can have dreams and premonitions and inspirations, and that our minds are much more mysterious than we might think.
Yeah.
And that's where synchronicity comes in, because everything that was happening to me was so perfectly set up. It was like somehow um, it was more than luck. It was more than just probability. It was like, somehow this was going to happen.
Yeah. So once you've seen that and you've seen, that it was a phenomena, it was something real kind of thing. Like now you can kind of return to that. Did you continue to have dreams later on? Did you engage it through meditation? Because essentially, meditation, you're hacking the dream state. You're going to that place in between the dream realms, and you're getting inspiration. And now you can um, do it with intent. Like I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna see what is out there for or in there for me to learn
Yeah.
and manifest it in my life or get a premonition about what my next step is. I mean, we even, psychedelic journeys, near death experiences, all of these kind of bring in this kind of realm of the infinite, um, in this expression of God, if you will. So, I mean, and you're studying religion and hanging with hippies and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
where did you go next with your
Yeah.
spiritual endeavors and trying to, you know,
Well,
repeat this encounter or something?
well, those years in Oregon were interesting ones. I came back east, and I wasn't having dreams, but I knew that I wanted to do something to help people. That was if you save him, you too shall live. So I got a job as a dialysis technician in the Manhattan Dialysis Center. And, pretty soon, like after a few months, I got a reputation there, even though I was putting people on lines and putting heparin in their rubber tubes and so forth. But I got a reputation as the guy who people could talk with, who would let them speak about their experience, about what was going on in their family and how this kidney failure was interrupting their lives. And I just became kind of a counselor, kind of a pastor for them, which was really meaningful to me. Um, but then, so in my life, I mean, it's not like I have had tons and tons of these experiences, but the book is about 12 of them. The one at St. Paul's, the two out west, and then there's some others along the way. So, for example, okay, just to bring it up to
Well, I will say it only takes one,
yeah, it only takes one. I mean, so Mother, people write books about Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and some psychiatrist really dumped on her because apparently, later in her life, she was a little bit depressed because she didn't have the same sort of vivid spiritual experiences that got her going
Yeah.
when she was a young nun. And my response to that is, well, isn't once enough? I mean, how much do you want to impose on synchronicity and the one mind? Shouldn't one really deep experience keep you going? And I do believe that. But I had some amazing experiences. Like, so 3 weeks ago, it was snowing a lot, but I actually, between the snows, I left my wife here on Long Island to handle the place. My kids are growing up now, so I drove west on Route 80 in my car, and I like doing that. I stop at Lewisburg. There's a Best Western Inn, and I can actually look and I can see where I left the car. It's really fun. And all my friends in Cleveland, they know this about me.
So what happens when you see that spot in your heart,
I
in your
in my
love?
heart,
Yeah.
it reassures me that even if, like, I have to work really hard. I got a very demanding job. I have to do a lot of managing stuff and fundraising, all kinds of things. But what it does is it takes me out of this day-to-day routinized living that I have, which is meaningful, but not over the top meaningful as would be the idea of synchronicity. But it reminds me, when I see that spot, there's a sacredness to that spot. It's right at Route 215, the 215 exit. It's Williamsport, it's Lewisburg. And so my daughter actually went to Bucknell University, which is in Lewisburg. So it's the same exit. And sometimes when I'd hear that maybe she was, up to some shenanigans, and she was at times, and I'd have to pick her up for, Christmas holiday or Easter or something. I would look over as I turned onto 215 South. I would look over at that spot where I knew I left the car, and I would say, I'm going to go easy on her. I'm gonna so there's this sort of ultimate reality that is forgiving, cherishing, guiding, protecting, and all those things. And so when I'm out on that highway, I feel elevated. I still go to Episcopal masses pretty regularly, and I do um, I do consider myself to be Christian, but not in a very orthodox way, in a very broad way.
Liberal, yeah. Which
Yeah,
probably most people listening to this do.
yeah, yeah. So so it's meaningful. I get out to Cleveland, which is I love Cleveland, and gave a talk in my old church, St. Paul's Church in Cleveland Heights, about God and love on Route 80, and the whole church was packed. I mean, there were 100 people there in their mask, and there were 200 or 300 out on Zoom. And it was interesting because they weren't freaked out. I mean, they all know me, we raised our kids in that church, but this is a part of me that I didn't necessarily put in people's faces, because, I'm trying to get along and make a good living and not seem too weird. So, but they loved it, and in the book, I'm referred to as the boy. I couldn't write about I or me. I had the boy, so the organist there, Carol Palkert, he walked up to me and said, I love Route 80. I'm all with the boy. So
so good.
So there's a beauty to it.
Yeah, I mean, your story is so similar with mine. I'm asking you questions and I'm just hearing things. Yeah. It's about, you mentioned alchemy, the alchemist, by Paulo Coelho. It's like recapturing the dream. Like, don't give up. Recapture that vision. Don't leave this place until it comes into fruition. Whatever you got to do to recapture it, to bring it into the moment. And I think that's, I don't know about all of us, but many of us have that dream, and then the process you go through of like giving up on it. And you were there. You were at the factory, and like, oh man, I'm gonna be here for the rest of my life. It's like hell almost. Like, no way, I can't be pushing buttons, and I'm building somebody else's dream when I have a dream that I haven't given up on. So the process of recapturing that, is the journey.
It's the journey. And so, eventually, like, I quit. I was a researcher at Cornell Med in pediatrics and endocrinology for about a year. I'm not an MD, but I'm a good scientist. And then I went to Penn and I studied immunology for a year or two. And then I had a full scholarship, an NIH scholarship. It was a free ride. But I quit. And I went to the University of Chicago Divinity School. You know why? Because that's where like Mircea Eliade, who wrote Shamanism, was teaching. That's where Joseph Campbell taught half the year. And I wanted to study world religions and get back in touch with with that part of my dream. And so I've worked in medical schools for the last 40 years, Chicago, Michigan, Cleveland, Stony Brook. But if you ask me where I'm from, I'd tell you Route 80, and I come in here every day. I get up early in the morning, about 5, and I do meditate, and I visualize a lot of the people I'm going to see over the course of the day. And I ask myself, what do they need? Because some people, they need just, a quiet listening ear. Some people need a little loyalty, a little expression of creative gusto. You got to kind of think through. Some people need some compassion because some bad things have happened. So I think forward over the course of the day, and I try to envision these encounters, and I take wherever I've been, even though I'm not an ordained minister, the medical students, but the faculty, they show up at the door, when they have things that they're struggling with, and I'm the same kid who used to be in that dialysis center in Manhattan. Somehow I take on that role, and I pray for everybody all the time. and I try to stay on the dream. But that's why, like when I got back, so it's only like now a couple of weeks since I got back from Cleveland. And I'll tell you, getting off Route 80, I actually drove all the way. It's about an 8-hour drive to Manhattan, and then another couple of hours on Long Island. I just drove straight. I felt fully energized. And just being out on Route 80, it just recentered me on the meaning of life. I know that's a really weird thing for your listeners to hear, but it so captures my life. And so that's why you have a book with the peculiar title, God and Love on Route 80, The Hidden Mystery of Human Connectedness.
So good. I know that just this instant gratitude. Probably every time you think about it, every time you look at the book, every time you remind yourself, Route 80, Route 80. I'm from Route 80.
Yeah,
It's like this immense gratitude to be alive.
yeah,
Near-death experiences it's like, it's so in a weird way, like you avoided. Well, you was on a near-death experience for sure. Like, you know what I'm saying? You're holding on and swish
yeah.
it
That
around
was
on the back of some crazy drunk dude's bike.
yeah,
Yeah. So now it's like when you get off, it's like, oh, I'm thankful. Oh my God. So that
yeah,
place of gratitude is where these miracles happen, where dreams are manifested, where you step
yes,
into, you know, you're you don't waste time. You don't waste a breath. You don't waste a heartbeat. You don't waste, a conversation with somebody struggling. That you're intentional. And that's just like, man, that is the concoction for
yeah,
living a mystical life, or encountering the mystical divine love of the
yeah.
universe, or what we call God.
A couple of years ago, one of my older friends had GI cancer, and uh, he'd gotten it diagnosed in a hospital in New York, but they weren't doing any surgery because it was forbidden. They were only doing COVID stuff,
Hmm.
and so they didn't take in any of these cases. And he was quite literally fainting. He couldn't walk more than 5 feet, and couldn't get into a hospital. So I knew back in Ohio, Mike DeWine, the governor, decided that actually there they would treat people for these serious emergency surgeries, even though there was COVID flying around. And so I got in touch with one of the heads of a department at the Cleveland Clinic. I can't talk about this, and I can't give any names, but um, this wonderful guy. And he took my friend as his patient. So my friend and his wife, they'd never driven west of the George Washington Bridge. They were like total Manhattanites, everything is Manhattan. It's crazy, I mean, they'd probably never been to Birmingham or someplace, which is a great city, or Stanford University there in Stanford University, where I've been giving talks over the years, in Alabama or whatever. I mean, the whole world was basically Manhattan. So they drove west, and when they got into the middle of Pennsylvania, there was some pretty mountainous areas, not super mountainous, but just high altitude. And when you have a bleeding out from a GI tumor and you're in high altitude, you can just faint, you can lose consciousness. So I was speaking with his wife on the cell phone and sort of walking her through this, getting her through this. And finally she got through the mountainous area and she got downhill and she was coming into Ohio. And, they treated him, they did a beautiful job, and he's fine. And, even something like that, you know, to me, it's all linked to the dream. If you save him, you too shall live. I mean, if you want to flourish in life, if you want to be happy, if you want to be healthy, contribute and give, And so that the first book I wrote, popular book, was Why Good Things Happen to Good People, How to Live a Healthier, Happier, Longer Life Through the Simple Act of Giving. And that did really well. But so I believe in that, but that itself, I didn't talk about it in the book because it's more of a sort of a popular sciencey and then sort of small story type book. But I really wanted at some point to say where this kind of emanated, where this came from. And so Route 80 is that story.
So talking about synchronicity, like, what do you think happens? Like, if you want to, describe it spiritually, because I believe the beauty is we can describe it on all of these levels. We can describe it as something that happens astrologically above us, something that happens within the mind when we position ourselves, or our heart space goes out. I like to look at it creative, spiritual stuff, like angels go out and start moving stuff, to kind of bring you into this synchronistic place, right? Of like, just the process of it. But what do you think happens with synchronicity? Are we just becoming more clear, like as we're becoming more cognitive and conscious and asking the questions, like we're just seeing, we're like reading the script, and then when it comes to, okay, yeah, I read about this part, is it already there, or are we changing things? Is what I'm saying too. Like, can you
Yeah.
like as we step into love, as we forgive, as we do all of these beautiful alchemical things, are we changing the outcome versus we're just going through the motions, even though the motions are magical if you look at them that way? What do you think about that?
Well, truth, if you ask me, did I make my life? Definitely not. I followed a journey. But on the journey, things are placed in our path. People are placed in our path. Opportunities are placed in our path. But it's up to us to respond to them. So there can be a path laid out, but will you take it to heart? And you have to be discerning, because it's not completely simple, and some things are part of the journey, and some things are perilous. But for me, I've always thought that my life has been mainly responding, that there's been this kind of destiny thing out there, and I still believe that. And your destiny is not your desires, your interests, your plans, your goals. Your destiny it involves the humility to realize that your little goals and your little plans probably don't mean much in the great scheme of things, and that we all do. I do believe everybody has a destiny, and I think that I agree with you that when we meditate, when we pray, we can connect with it more easily. That's what spiritual practice is about. I mean, Christians speak of providence. It's not a bad idea. I don't believe in complete predestination. I do think that we have our responsibility in the journey, and we have to be really careful to keep the journey alive.
Do you think that the things we mentioned, love and gratitude, are like the fuel for all of this stuff? The fuel for faith, the fuel for magical experiences, the fuel for being present and manifestation or synchronicity or any of that thing? Do you think that being aware but being present with that love is key?
I think it is key. I think that this is where this whole thing of positive psychology is so cool. Where people study gratitude, at UC Davis, or forgiveness at at Virginia Commonwealth, or they study kindness. My institute studies love. A lot of this is around Marty Seligman on happiness at UPenn. I mean, this is really a big deal right now. Not just studying disease states, but also those sorts of positive emotional and spiritual states that make us feel happier and make us healthier and live more fulfilling lives. So I do believe that that's key. And when you put your mind on others and away from the self and the problems of the self, it actually turns off a lot of these negative neurological pathways of bitterness and hostility and fear and so forth. It's a statement in the Bible. Perfect love casts out fear. I mean, that's actually true. That's scientifically true. When the mesolimbic pathway of love and happiness is turned on, the neurological pathways associated with these destructive emotions turn off. They can't be on at the same time.
So strange. You have different people and personifications in the Bible. I've been studying this so much of, two people can look at the same thing but see something different. And you got the Pharisees who would see people who were distraught, see people who had physical ailments in their bodies or prostitutes or whatever, and they look at them in judgment and condemning and say, this came upon you because you're a bad person. And Jesus kind of teaches and imparts to his disciples, hey, look at those people with compassion. Don't look at them and point the finger in judgment, but to step into a miracle is to look at them and see the potential and the compassion. So
Yes.
that's a
Yeah.
choice, right? That's a choice.
Yes.
And I feel like we've trained ourselves to like see the negative. Or I even talked with a friend of mine the other day who still holds this. He talked about 9/11 and how he still blames the Muslim community and the Muslim world and stuff. And when he sees Muslims, there's still animosity. And I'm like, man, I know most of us felt that way maybe at some point, but it was like quickly, hold on, this isn't our enemy. You know what I'm saying? Even if it's a small group of these, whatever you think, you let somebody control the way that you feel and you see them as an enemy versus as a brother or as a friend, or even if you think they're misguided, right? The two people look at something contingent upon the love in their heart. How
Yeah.
much love do you have? How much forgiveness? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I'm a believer in the spirituality of imperfection. As soon as you become a perfectionist, you're out of business. I mean, you're not going to have any lasting relationships. You're not going to have any meaningful interactions because nobody's perfect, and that includes you,
Yeah.
So, in AA, they talk a lot about the spirituality of imperfection in the 12-step programs. And so I think that's so important, and it helps with forgiveness because people who are humble and who are honest about their own nature and the mistakes they've made in life and the things they wish they could have back again, I think they can be more forgiving.
Yeah.
Well,
there's an empathy it's a natural empathy that comes to you when you've been through something. But this isn't for everybody. Like some people go through stuff and get bitter.
Right.
Other people go through stuff and become empathic for or have empathy for people who are in that situation. Like, I know what it feels like to be homeless. Right. Let me help the homeless as much as I can, versus like, again, the Pharisee look is like, you guys deserve this because you're just drinking all the time, or you wasted your money and I'm not going to give to you. I know you mentioned the one guy in your TED talk that was about like, he wasn't going to help anybody. He doesn't do nothing for free. Like he has to get something out of it as well.
That's nice
versus like, hey man, that person's having a hard time,
I don't do nothing for nothing.
Nothing for nothing.
Yeah. I mean, so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have in the medical world a pretty well-known phrase called the wounded healer.
Yeah.
People who do exceptional work as nurses or clinical social workers or physicians in an area where they too have been healed. Yeah. And, you have to be discerning. I mean, you can't just run around and say, by the way, that happened to me too. I mean, someone comes in the room with a broken arm with a kid, and you jump off, say, hey, I did that when I was 5, so don't worry about it. Yeah. But you have to be thoughtful about it. But you can, in quiet, impactful ways, help people deal with their situations, sometimes situations that are very, very difficult, and bring in your own narrative, your own story. It is true that there are some people who don't get to that place. I mean, Ebenezer Scrooge in the Christmas Carol is a good example of someone who got turned aside by this young gal he really loved when he was a kid, at least a young man, and he just never got out of it. He just spent his whole life buried in this rumination and bitterness, and he wasn't happy. No one around him was happy, But then, this is the thing where, um, there's always the possibility for a resurrection. And there's nobody who's ever so far gone. This is what I want to say, that they can't be reborn. And that's something, the Russian novelists like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky talked about a lot. But there's, in the end, St. Paul had it right. He said, nothing ultimately can separate us from the love of God.
Yeah.
Nothing. Zilch, nada. And so you can be in a really difficult downward negative spiral, but hopefully something will break you out of it. And that's what happened, with Tim, and ultimately Ebenezer Scrooge is the joyful, loving guy who's jumping up and down in the streets of London. But I do believe that nobody is beyond that kind of spiritual growth, that kind of spiritual resurrection, and you should never count anybody out. And a lot of times, you've got to be open to surprises. Even human nature at its worst, and you see it in the papers, I mean, things happen that are like completely off the table, unbelievable stuff. But you always have to remind yourself that there's a flip side to human nature. There is the kindness and the gentleness and the love, and especially when we connect with this higher energy, then I think that can really sway the balance. That's what I think a spiritual relationship is important, because that, there's a lot of reasons you can go toward the negative, but going toward the positive, you get to your earlier question. I think if you're making that effort, you can get reinforced. I think that this infinite mind can appreciate that and can bring help and even more synchronicity into your life.
So what are practices or ways to do that? I mean, obviously, changing the way that you see things, looking for the best in every situation. I mean, that helps so much. And you train your brain to do that. Like if you are late for something, or there's a traffic jam or something, like you can really easily get upset. Man, we're going to be late. Man, I hate being late and all this. Or you literally switch it. You change the narrative in your head. Or you say,
Yeah.
you know what? God, love is protecting me from a wreck up there. There's some kind of danger that this traffic jam is blessing me. So the universe is trying to help me versus it's trying to harm me. So there's definitely that way to extract good, gratitude, and beauty. We talked about meditation and prayer. If people already have a little bit of love, is that the energy that gives them the ability to do what I just said? Or how do we get more love? By doing good deeds. You talked about helping the homeless and helping people. Does that expand our heart space to
Yeah.
carry more love? What do you think?
Oh, I think that kind, loving actions expand heart space. I'm not talking just about external altruism, routinized helping behavior, not necessarily done grudgingly, but done without any kind of inner spirit. I think actually Mother Teresa had a comment about that that's really pretty good. She says it's not how much you do, but it's how much you do with kindness. And in general, if you cultivate that attitude, it's going to help you deal with these difficult circumstances. But I mean, but we're all flawed. That's why I'm an imperfectionist. I mean, when I come to work in the morning, I have to turn left on a Nichols Road, and there's an annoying stoplight. And if there's somebody who stops at that light completely unnecessarily when it's yellow, I am capable of, I won't fall full chested on my horn and yell out an expletive, which is what they do on the Long Island Expressway all the time, by the way. but I feel that frustration. And so that's a time to really be spiritually
Yeah.
mindful, to be self-controlled. Self-control is really important.
So here's the idea that maybe that temptation never leaves. That it just irks you every time, but every time you identify it and choose love. No, this person's probably having a bad day. No, this person may gas it because I blew the horn and they may get into an accident, right? Or they may pull out a gun, So the idea, like, most people would want that to be taken out of them. I don't want this animosity. I don't want this, impatientness to be in me. But I give so much credit to the fact that you can notice it. That I notice that part of me wants to do this, but I'm not. Does it eventually go away? Maybe sometimes. Or is it that every time I get to surrender that to love? I get to choose love or hate. There's two paths in front of me.
Well, it's constant, and we all have to be mindful. We try to teach all the students around here mindfulness, which is this noticing of your emotional responses to the circumstances around you. What's your emotional response to someone with terminal dementia? What's your emotional response to to a patient who is completely non-adherent to treatments that are going to be very helpful? How do you manage your own soul, your own being? Because your narrative is hooked up with their narrative. It's like a double helix. So you've got to be aware of that. And we're actually writing a paper right now called Stop, Knock, Breathe, about how teams in a hospital, as they go to a new patient, should stop and just for a minute, just breathe deep and knock on the door, and ideally wait for an answer and make sure that somebody's covered if possible, and just pause a little bit, because otherwise they're just hooked into the routine, the chronological pressures of rushing from point A to point B, and they're not happy and their patients aren't happy. So we have to somehow be able to pull ourselves out of that. And I actually have a little device here, which I'll share with you. This is from the Brahma Kumaras, and they're at the upstate New York. They have a really nice retreat center, especially for healthcare folks. It's called Just a Minute. It says, you can't really read it, but it says just a minute. It's just a little plastic thing. And you just, even in your busiest moments, when you just don't think you can get a handle on it, just watch this in 60 seconds. It's all it takes. And just focus your mind on that sand running through that little hourglass. And that'll help you get a handle on things. So I keep this right by my desk.
Mm-hmm.
I really like it, actually.
It's awesome. That's all it takes. There's so much, information coming out about that. Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Or take 5, or breath work, be mindful, be in the moment, pause, right? Well, let me ask you this too. So just to throw in the metaphysics of it, but it also the science of it. Someone who is more loving, more kind, more compassionate. We can feel things in or around people. You get around somebody and you just feel good by being around them, not even knowing who they are, but they just have more love in their heart, and their heart is expanded. Their torus field, their aura, whatever you want to call it. You get around them and you just feel love. Other people, you get around and it's like, oh, something's up, something's off in the energetic fields. Like, have you felt that before? Do you get around people and you can instantly know, okay, something's up? Or, you walking into a room where somebody just got a bad diagnosis. Do you walk into a room and feel the fear? Do you walk into a room and feel the love? Do you walk into the room and feel uncertainty? Like, is that too woo-woo for you? Or what?
No, it's not.
I don't
It's
think
not
it is.
weird. There's a really, really good biologist who spent a lot of time in India. and his name is Richard Sheldrake.
Mm.
He's got a
Is
lot.
it Rupert?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Rupert
Yeah.
Sheldrake. Yeah, and he works with the Noetic Institute and stuff out in California, and he has this idea of a morphic field,
Mm.
and he really believes that love energy is a kind of a field, and even like when I was out at Reed College, it was my mother. It wasn't my father, by the way. It was my mother who had that premonition and woke up and called me on that phone. And I think a lot of times this sort of connectivity occurs between mothers and their children, and situations where there is a very deep love. Um, so yeah, morphic fields are how I would describe it, and I do think that people have these morphic fields. I won't necessarily travel into the metaphysics and all of
I
that kind
will.
of stuff.
I'm joking.
I will let you can please do.
No,
But I do
what I
think,
mean, they, this conversation, it complements one another, because just being so
yeah,
far out and, woo woo versus being able to explain it scientifically is where
yeah,
we meet. And this is where
yes,
this is where we're headed.
yeah, I think so too. I think so too. So I like this idea of a morphic field, and the guy the British neurologist who discovered brain waves right after World War I, his son was in battle in France, and he was very close with his sister, and his sister woke up one night and she had a dream that this fellow's son had been killed, and she told her father, and it turned out to be true. And then he spent the rest of his life thinking, there's something about this that is not just what should I say? It didn't just happen. There's something going on. There's some level of connection of energy that's going on there. And so he's the guy who discovered brainwaves. And I think you got to take that into account. A lot of times, these deep connections that we have do, in fact, yield amazing premonitions. And yeah, I mean, when I walk into a room, I mean, I'm pretty mirthful. I've been in this hospital for the last 2 years. We were like an epicenter for the COVID stuff
Mm-hmm.
when it was really raging. It's not raging now, but it was really raging, and it was tough on a lot of the healthcare workers, and they were struggling for all kinds of good reasons. And I made a point of, we have escalators in the middle of the hospital, and I rode the escalators at least once a day up and down. There's like 5 stories of escalators, and I would see people, and I'd smile, and they'd wave, and then I'd tell little uplifting, corny jokes, like things like, hey, what did the fish say when it swam into the wall? Damn. Or something along those lines. What did the envelope say to the stamp? Stick with me, we'll go places. I just was working a lot on mirth, because mirth is a spiritual quality. And this whole COVID thing, I mean, I feel like people have got to learn to laugh again. And when people laugh, in a millisecond,
Yeah.
Everything changes. It's like a miracle. It's a miracle. So in Why Good Things Happen to Good People, I actually have 10 expressions of love, and one of them is mirth. I don't mean like distasteful, destructive humor that can be hurtful for people, but I mean just light, uplifting stuff, and how much you can do for the world around you if you just cultivate that a little bit. And you have to be willing to be silly. But that's okay. So I did a lot of that, and you can create an atmosphere around you that, and that's an expression of love.
It's good. Yeah. I mean, you carry that. That is your expression. That is your statement of faith, if you will. It's like what is coming. It's your, I would call it your spiritual aroma. It's your aura. Like that's who you are. It's not who you say you are. It's
Right.
what you do. And I think, they kind of go hand in hand, but um, you can tell that, and children could tell that. I remember my daughter when she was young, friends would come over and bring people to our house, and it was like a stranger and standoffish, stay away from them, and then other people come over and the kids are just drawn to them. I really feel like that's some type of, they're closer to heaven or the spirit world when they're little, and they can sense that kind of stuff, that we've become numb to.
So the kids, so you have to take the spirituality of a child seriously. I mean, there's a friend of mine named Lisa Miller who wrote a book. It was a bestseller. She's at Columbia Teachers College, and it's called The Spiritual Child. And it's a study. It's it's an investigation into the spiritual experiences of children. But oh my goodness, and it's really easy to just write that stuff off, say, oh, it's just a childish imagination, But there's something there, and adolescents can have amazing experiences. But children, they're less corrupted, and they're not cynical or sardonic. I mean, and even the studies like from the Yale Child Study Center, which we actually funded, Paul Bloom's stuff of children, toddlers. I mean, 1 year to year and a half old, like if you do a puppet show and you have 3 acts. One is a certain kind of puppet goes up the incline, can't quite make it up, and then falls down. That's puppet 1. The puppets are really different colors, shapes. Second act, another puppet goes up following the first one and helps it get on the plateau. And then the third act, a Mean Jack puppet follows that puppet up, and the puppet gets up on the plateau, but then Mean Jack pushes him down. So you take these 3 puppets, one's like big and yellow and circular, another's red and green and rectangular and has big blurry eyes and stuff. And you put those in front of a toddler. 90% of the time, the toddler will stare at or reach out and touch that second puppet, the Good Samaritan, the helper puppet. Because they know, and Bloom wrote a book about this, they know that there's something going on there. So it's not like children are, hardwired for nastiness, to be gremlins. I mean, it depends on what buttons we push as parents, I mean, if you keep humiliating your kids, you're going to get some difficult results. But yeah, I mean, kids are actually very gifted, and they can pick things up. And I mean, in my case, when I was a kid, I was kind of known as being a little bit dreamy. Even when I was 6, 7 years old, I wasn't quite, hanging out like everybody else. And then I had that dream when I was 15, and my teacher, Rod Wells, he did not need to take that seriously. He could have dissed me. You could say that's just complete junk.
Yeah.
But he was open-minded about it, and so he actually drove me from New Hampshire to New Haven again, which is about a 4-hour drive. And he was a graduate of Yale Divinity School, so he set it up, and I gave my dream, my presentation on the dream, to these 15 or so MDiv students training for ministry. And the teacher happened to be really into adolescent spirituality and child spirituality. And he took me seriously, and that's what I think we need to do. We need to actually, what Jesus said? Jesus said, those who enter the kingdom of heaven are like a child.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't just say that. He just didn't say stuff. I mean, that was something that was meaningful to him. And people say, well, what does that mean? I mean, can you be so naive and childish? You can't get through life that way. No, he was saying, don't ever forget the child within you.
Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget 80. Don't forget 80. That's where you're from. That's who you are. It's still in you.
It's still in you.
It's eternal. Yeah.
That's the eternal.
Yeah, because I actually looked that word up the other day. There's another scripture where it says, he's having a talk and he says, any of you that cause any of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it's better for you to jump into the ocean with a
Yeah.
millstone tied around your neck. And it's like, if you teach them wrong, if you rob them of their innocence, kind of thing, right? But it
Mhm.
also says the little ones that believe in me, and I looked at it as like I broke the word down, right, as used in the Greek anyway, and it says immature Christians.
Mhm.
Like they just simply believe. They don't know the politics. They don't know the rules and regulations. They just are enamored with this.
Yeah.
They're in love with this guy and they harness it. Do, do not take that away. And really, you
Right.
can learn from them and you need to have that in you as well, in your study, in
Yeah.
your approach, in your spirituality. Stay in the midst of that. Protect that innocence. Return to the innocence. It's such a beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
commandment.
And it's a unique capacity that we all have. But the thing is, I mean, this is why, as I say, I do go to a local Episcopal church, most Sundays, because I love the prayers, and Jesus said, "Do this in memory of me," so I'm okay with that. But you got to remember that there was so much politics and fighting between factions in the early church. And they were having these wars, literally wars over, doctrine, homoousios versus homoousios. I mean, is it, I mean, and then you get these extremely engaged creeds, which are kind of a little bit hard to follow for a lot of people. But if we would just get back to the simplicity of Jesus, and so I have a lot of respect for Jesus. I mean, don't even though I'm fairly esoteric. I mean, I still define myself as Christian, but in the sense that I believe that Jesus was one with the divine, and I believe that when we pray in His name, it's special. And I do believe, I went to the University of Chicago Divinity School, so I didn't just do world religions, I did theology too. I think the atonement is really critical to Christianity, that somehow this really spiritually enlightened being would be put through that terrible ringer and would somehow come out of it saying, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." I mean, now that's holding your own. you
Yeah.
know, that's a lot more than a yellow light. you know.
Well, I mean, if it's your story, it's your story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, because
yeah,
that could be the end of your story very quickly with the wrong
yeah,
response, right? Like I said,
yeah,
you can wave a gun at them, they can wave a gun at you. They can, you can give them a love tap and bump them into traffic. Like they're so like it's what do you do? You're in this situation. What do you do? Well,
yeah,
all creation is waiting and watching. What do you do? Jesus on the cross. What do you do? Do
yeah,
you curse the people? Do you call down a legion of angels? Because he said he could to come and destroy the people that are trying to, harm the innocent. What do you do? What do you do? And so yeah, you have to find yourself in those stories, which is the
mhm,
beauty of myth. And you mentioned Joseph Campbell, and I
yeah,
hope that more Christians, are starting to lean towards that with the allegory and the metaphysics and the symbology
yeah,
and those things. And I think they are. I really do. But still hold the beauty of the spiritual practice of some of their
yeah,
early traditions of faith, or just simply doing what Jesus said do.
yeah. I think so. So I'm actually optimistic about the spiritual future. I realize there's a lot of nastiness in our world right now, but I don't think there's a political answer to it. By the way, I think there's the answer has to be spiritual. You just have to get to a different level.
So good.
You
So
know,
good. Yeah, I'm studying that like crazy right now. Just the levels of spirituality or the levels or layers of love. You know, it just
Mhm.
goes right into your talk. And I've been telling everybody that the majority of these talks that I've been doing have been synchronistic with my
Yeah,
studies. You know, I've kind
good.
of been tactful about who I,
Yeah,
talk to. We're doing less, but it's been tactful about how does this add to, the narrative of what I'm teaching and,
yes.
and what I'm studying, and how to get more love in you is how to get more light
Yeah,
that is the fuel for any spiritual practice or any
yeah,
divine love. So I really appreciate this talk and
good.
what you bring and brought to the table. And I encourage people to look into your work, to watch some of your talks online as well. Tons of knowledge, tons of research on your websites and things like that, your book, everything that you're doing, man. I appreciate this conversation. Let people know where they can go to check out your work. Where's the best place for them to go to get your books and to engage with you?
Well, just Stephen with a PH. I'm a PHer, so StephenGpost.com is my main um, website. Although there's also the Institute, which is unlimitedloveinstitute.org, which, by the way, I didn't name that. Sir John Templeton, the investor, he actually faxed me from Nassau in the Bahamas in 2000. And he said, Stephen, we need to start an institute to study the greatest human asset, which is love. And I said, great, what should we call it? And he said, the Institute for Research on Unlimited Love. And I was around a lot of geneticists in a medical school at Case, Cleveland. I faxed back, Sir John, maybe we should call it the Institute for Creative Altruism. He faxed back, no, I think unlimited love up to $8.9 million. And I faxed back, Sir John, I love that language. It jumps right off the page. But he was completely right,
Yeah.
because it's the language of love that opens this up to the spiritual traditions. Altruism is a very dry, sciencey term that really doesn't do much for your soul,
Mm-hmm.
So, so I'm glad you're studying all this truth, and I think you're on a great path. I honor it, respect it, and I think you have a very nice style. I think you are doing a lot, but I think you could be very successful in bringing people into this, and so I'm grateful to have contributed.
Yeah, thank you so much. It means the world. And yeah, it is metaphysical, but it has
Mhm.
to be practical too, right?
Yeah,
Love,
yeah,
forgiveness, honor those that you disagree with. Man, everything Jesus talked about, like just do what he said do.
yeah,
It ends for so many people of just believing in him.
yeah,
But he says, listen, if you believe in me, I want you to believe in me, but do what I say.
yeah.
Love those who don't deserve it. Anybody can love people who deserve it. They deserve love. Show
That's right.
love to the person who doesn't deserve it. Show forgiveness to those who don't deserve it. Why? Because probably somewhere along your line you didn't or don't deserve it either. So
That's
there's
right.
that empathy, grace that was
Yeah,
shown to me. I want to continue to show it to others. That's all I can do is show you what's been shown to me.
I agree. Okay.
So thank you
Hey,
so
it's an
much for
honor. I
coming on,
wish
brother.
everybody well, and it's great to talk with you. We'll talk again.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
It's a
Many
pleasure. God
blessings.
bless. See you. Bye-bye.
Wow, guys, that was such a good talk, man. Everything that I've been studying and researching has been synchronistic. Even the talks that I'm having on the podcast, like there's so many people who are reaching out, and I'm getting emails, and like I said, I'm doing less talks. I'm editing more. You guys see that, but they've been right on the money, like all of them. The majority. Let's don't say all. The majority. 8 out of 10. So, man, I'm just been engaged in my heart or in these conversations and as a student. And so you got to stay there. Like, the idea of returning to the innocence or remaining childlike as the immature Christian. What do? They want to know. They're at the beginning place of why you got into it. Stay there. Stay teachable. Stay open. Hold all things loosely. Show love. Show compassion. And do the first works. Like you see when in Revelations where people in churches got off in the end, and they thought they were so lofty. They thought they were so spiritual. They thought everything was okay. But God, they stand in front of the judgment throne, and God says, you did all these amazing things, I got this against you. What is it? You left your first love. And so that's what an immature Christian, the innocence represents, returning to the first love. I don't care how long you've been in this thing, and the love of some have waxed cold, right? I've been there. I go there sometimes, but it's the journey to recapture why I said yes. Why am I showing up? Why did I get started? And because very quickly that becomes about other things. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're a spiritual movement, these principles apply. Remember why you got started. This podcast, I have to tell you so many times, remember why I got started. Because you forget the beauty of being reminded. We talk about communion, and he said, do this in remembrance of me. And, the Christian practice of taking the Eucharist or partaking of communion is Jesus says, listen, do this in remembrance of me. Why? Because you'll forget. You'll make it about other things. You'll make it about money. You'll make it about teaching. You'll make it about being right. You'll make it about spiritual encounters. And at the end of your life, you'll be depressed because you don't have as many as you did at the beginning. Maybe they've stopped, right? You've made it about something different. Make it about the reason why you got started. You got to keep that there. And yes, there's other notches and other things come in, right? And you learn and you grow. Many of us just want to return all the way back to that elementary place of not knowing about things and where everything was simple. I don't think you're supposed to return there in knowledge and intellect, but in the heart space. Because if you're there in the heart space, it's going to give you the love and the ability and the fuel to get to those next higher levels and be trusted. To be trusted with the fuel to go even higher versus hitting your ceiling. You can go to the next level of the spiritual alchemical process, which we can call the spiritual New Jerusalem, that has those levels. We talk about spiritual ascension and different levels that people are going to. So that's very much what I'm studying, and I know that my heart has to be in that place of brokenness and love for myself and for my family and for my enemies and for God and for everything. So the more love that you bring into your life, into your heart, by doing good deeds, by meditating, by stepping into mindfulness, there's so many practices, prayer, listening to good music, like bringing more beauty in front of your eyes and allowing it to come into your soul, allowing it to come into your heart space and expanding to your spiritual body, your spiritual and etheric body, coming in through the eye gates, through the mouth gates, through the ear gates, coming into your heart, wrestling with it, keeping all the beautiful things there, getting rid of the things that you don't need, right? And holding on to that beauty. And that's how you get transformed. Like, make that a lifestyle, a decision. 1,000 good decisions, 1,000 healthy meals, 1,000 days of devotion, 1,000 days of reading the Bible, right? You're transformed for sure. It doesn't even take 1,000. Honestly, you'll start seeing results very soon, but it's about consistency. Consistency with what? The things that are helping you, the things that are blessing you, the things that are good. The Bible says if there be anything true, if there be anything of good report, of anything noble, anything virtuous, think about those things. Think on these things. Meditate on these things. Go to Psalm 119 and read about meditating upon the precepts of God, His laws, His love, the stories that are in there. What happens to your heart when you meditate on these precepts and you're transformed? Meditation is key. Meditation is dope, but you can meditate on different things. Whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're struggling with, you're wrestling with, hold on to it, wrestle with it, meditate on it. And if you don't let go, you'll be blessed with what? A higher level. Your attitude determines your altitude of where you are spiritually, where you are mentally, where you are physically, working out, taking care of your body. All of that is your attitude. And attitude goes back to what? The immature Christian. I just love God, man. I don't know nothing about all this politics and who's right and I don't know nothing about that. I know that I'm in love, and I know that I've been given grace, and I know that I've been set free from the things that are killing me. Listen, remind yourself, do this in remembrance of me. Take communion, get a bracelet, get a tattoo. I don't care, whatever you got to do to have things around you. That's why, religious iconography and icons and crystals and plaques. I mean, I got so much stuff around here. I want to be reminded. I want to be reminded of all the beautiful things in my life and all of the things that I'm grateful for, because how easy and how quickly we forget, to be in the moment, to walk in love. Find gratitude in the situation. I tell you, Mark chapter 8, where Jesus feeds the 4,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He's got to feed thousands of people. And it's a situation that seems impossible. It seems hopeless, but it says he saw the multitude that were following him, and they hadn't eaten in days, and they were hungry. And he had compassion. He said, you know what, man, I got to give them something to eat. They haven't been eating. Obviously, the story is about physical bread, eating food and fish, but the spiritual bread. Jesus is the bread of life. You can eat and drink and be filled and be sustained, sustenance spiritually, right? So we got to look at the deeper meaning. Jesus looks at the 4,000 with compassion. There's one key, compassion. And then he grabs the bread. He says, that's all we got? Yeah, that's what we got. Okay, it's enough. It's enough. What do you mean it's enough? Look at these. Listen, and it says that he blesses it. He blesses it. And when he blesses it, that blessing is to find gratitude. It's to be thankful. He blesses it. Says the blessing before the meal. I mean, same thing. Thank you for this. Blesses it. And a little becomes much. And now there's more to go around. There's enough for everybody. What are you getting to? Because in that place of looking for gratitude and thankful for just this little bit of stuff, there is fuel for the miracle. There's multiplication that happens there. Now you have enough to go around for everybody. Now your gratitude can feed those around you because it's coming through every conversation. It's embedded in every thought. Finding gratitude. He takes the fish and he blesses it. He says the blessing over them, right? He blesses them and he gives thanks, is what it is. With the fish, he gives thanks. So he's looking for gratitude. How are you giving thanks over, 2 fish? Like, I don't even think that's enough to feed you, Jesus. So how is this going to feed your disciples and 4,000 people? Well, I'm going to make it because I'm going to find thankfulness in it. And maybe we'll all just get a little piece, man, and it'll sustain us. I don't know, but he blesses it. It multiplies again, says grace, gives thanks. There's enough to go around. That's gratitude. It says that we must enter into his courts with thanksgiving. We must enter into his gates with praise. Finding gratitude. You got to just quickly find something to be grateful for. I know you find yourself in situations and there's like nothing around you to be grateful for. Everything's bad. Listen, be grateful for the memory of the thing that existed. I still have a memory. I still remember the good times we had together. Friends turn their back on you. People pass on into eternity, and these things that hurt, and it feels like a piece of you died. But listen, tap into the gratitude, which is looking at the pictures and to remember beautiful encounters. Because if you don't, it changes everything. It undoes everything beautiful. But fight for that. Hold on to it. Believe it. And when you do that, it gives you the gratitude. It gives you the fuel to step into that thing which is beautiful. And there you'll see the miracle. There you'll see the magic happen. I feel, I say this as much as I can, that, a lot, my story lines so much up with Stephen, just about being able to recapture the dream, to tap into alchemy, to look at what you're given and say, I don't want this. I was so many jobs that I had over my life, and none of them I wanted to be doing, none of them. But where contentment came in and where magic came in is I was there and I didn't want to be there. It's a very hard place. It's a strange place. But to find something beautiful in it, to see it as a blessing, because there's a blessing in there somewhere. If you hold on to it long enough, if you wrestle with it, if you think about it long enough, there's a blessing in it somewhere. So all of the jobs that I've been on, I didn't want to do any of that. Like I'm a creative. Like I'm into the arts, and I could think of 1,000 other things that I would rather be doing with my time, but I have to earn a living. I have to keep the lights on. So you're in this place where you're like, man, I don't know how I got here. Maybe I should have went to school. Maybe I should have did this. But reality is I'm working for the city, and I'm, cleaning up ditches in the middle of nowhere that nobody, even sees, but it helps to drain for the city. I'm working with inmates and these things, and working them on the job, and just in a place that I didn't like it. I didn't want to be there, but in my mind I was always somewhere else. Like I was always creating. I was working on music. I couldn't wait to get off to work on music, to write. So what I would do, I would write on the job. I would write my music on lunch break. I would write, on bathroom breaks or whatever, So in there, I'm in this place of desperation essentially, but using it and finding the good in it, and I learned how to drive a backhoe. I learned how to use a shovel. I learned how to clean and to sweep and to mop and things that really I've never had a father. So like it really, I was able to see God in my life as a father, teaching me through hands-on, go work here, go do that, responsibility, and then eventually I went to another job. I got my CDL and I was making $7.50 an hour, and I've been there 5 years, right? I got my CDL, got another job driving trucks, but I ended up driving a truck for a company called A&M Portables, cleaning porta potties. Listen, it paid way more, nastier work, right? I even that, like, I don't know why I was there. I didn't want to be there, but it was just by default. I needed something, and that's the next door that opened. I walked through it. I don't ever feel like I was supposed to be, like I wanted to be there. Obviously I was supposed to, right? Because that was the journey of something to learn there. But it's about finding gratitude, even on those jobs that you hate. And every time that you do that and you sit in it and you stay in it, you'll find out that that's what opens up the door for you to step into the next level. Is once you find that bliss, once you find that gratitude, even in those places that you hate. So that job, listen, I would go home, I'd have, stuff, waste on me. It was a waste management companies, I'd like cleaning toilets all day, like 15 hours a day sometimes, and you're wrecked and going in early, getting off. I was making good money, but I worked so much I didn't even really have a time to be off and spend it. Didn't like it, but still making music, still finding gratitude and looking for opportunity. Another job opened up. I started working as an electrician helper, and doing the work wasn't as dirty, but still there's like, electrician, what am I doing here? A friend got me the job, and but it was like always like stepping up little bit at a time, levels of it, but always trying to find gratitude, and that just lasted for years. And other jobs, and going back of driving trucks for 10 years of delivering car parts, which was, I got to listen and learn a lot of things by listening to audiobooks and listening to podcasts and preaching sermons and stuff. But I didn't want to be there. That truck ended up becoming a cage, and knew that I wasn't destined for this. This wasn't my ending. This wasn't my story. How do I get to the next level? And this place where you just want to give up because it just feels like a dead end. You're getting old. You probably should have went to school, and this isn't for everybody. Everybody doesn't get to capture their dream. Everybody doesn't get to become a rapper. Everybody doesn't get to do this. Only some people do, and you're struggling with that demon, with that Satan that's causing you to doubt, and so just one thing leading to another, finding gratitude there, even with tears, of this, like sitting in my work truck and crying, like, am I supposed to give up on this dream? Is it a pipe dream? Is it only real to you? Is it your imagination? Because you have all these infinite possibilities that exist, but you're always stuck doing, trading your time for money, and also trading your time for something that you don't like to do. Maybe it's our lot in life. Maybe it's our job, our job, that is, we're miserable, right? Maybe it is because Adam sinned and he had to work for the sweat of his brow to earn a living, as we've been told. But I ended up reading The Alchemist and getting to a place where I knew I needed to recapture the dream. don't give up on it. Give it one last shot, but really come to God and put everything down. And so instead of like, 'cause I was inwardly, there was no rest, because I was always trying to make something happen, make something work, and it never would. Like, it would always reach a ceiling, and yeah, you'd reach people. And I've been podcasting and doing music, and it was cool, but that's when you're off. When you get off of work, then you can podcast. Then you can, and I would look forward to getting off of work to spend time with family, but to also do what I love, where my heart's desire was, and for years. But eventually, things opened up, and there's a whole story about it. Read it in my book, but it's about finding gratitude there. And once I did, and I quit trying to make stuff happen, and I became present on the job, to do your work as you're doing it unto the Lord, to serve your boss, to don't steal time on the clock. You know what I'm saying? Just be present with conversations with my customers that I delivered to and stuff. And when I did that, that's when things really transformed for me, when I found that gratitude, and then ended up getting let go. And but it was an opportunity to try this, to try to podcast full time, to try to do music full time. And remember my first day of stepping into it. We haven't looked back since. That was in August of 2017, I believe. I think August 2017 that I've been doing this full time. Yeah, haven't looked back since. It was even that was a struggle. It was a work. It would show up. It was, the idea of like, I'm driving a truck for 15 hours a day, working 40 plus hours a week on any job. What could you get accomplished if you put 40 plus hours a week towards music? Podcasting 40 plus hours a week. Like if you get to wake up and do that, like my mind's, again, infinite possibilities, stepping into that awe and wonder, and the idea to wrestle with it, not to let it go. Hold on, man, wait, let's see. I wonder, what's that like? What kind of happiness does that bring? What kind of love and gratitude does that bring? So kind of like daydreaming about it is putting yourself in that situation. And while I'm on the job and that wasn't my reality, my faith was telling me that it's possible somewhere, and we stepped into it. We haven't looked back. So I'm just every day is a blessing. Every day is grateful doing what I'm doing now. But you got to look back at that place that you're complaining. You start complaining about things that you asked God for, that were like an answer to prayer, and now you're ungrateful. Hold on, you were cleaning toilets. Now you're driving trucks delivering. Listen, it's an upgrade, bro. Remember where you came from. So that's like where you grab the gratitude from, to remember where you came from with the little. Jesus looks at the little and said, man, listen, I remember when we had nothing. So listen, this 2 fishes, listen, that's more than enough. Find gratitude, find it there. I say all of that to say, when I asked Stephen about driving down 80 and driving past that bridge, like what happens in your heart? I was strategic in asking that, because when I drive past the toilet place where I used to clean toilets, and you have to go punch in and get ready to go clean toilets all over the county. I drive past there now, go and play basketball. Playing basketball at an hour that I should have been working, like as far as if I was working at any of those jobs. On lunch break, on my friend's lunch break, hey, Truth, you want to go shoot basketball? Let's go. And I drive past there, and there's cars all in the parking lot. I say, you would probably be in a toilet, an hour away from here, cleaning, and when I drive past there, listen, instant gratitude. I just say, thank you for allowing me to the Creator, thank you for allowing me to go through that. Now it makes this moment even more potent. It makes this moment even more gracious. Why? Because when you go through these hardships, and you go through the questions, and you go through the contrast of what is beautiful and what is dark, and where are you on that level? And I've drawn this whole time. I'm gonna show you my notes. They're crazy looking. They're scribble scratch, but if you guys can see, maybe. I think it's this. Yeah, anyway, it's scribble scratch, but there's some kind of a spiral. There's an earth. There's contrast of darkness that gets lighter. There's a spiral that goes up and it goes down, and we're talking about these levels, right? What level of darkness are you in? You know, there's levels of darkness. There's levels of light. There's levels of gratitude. Like many people only, you find gratitude when something good happens for you. How about you go back into the darkness and bring gratitude there? I mean, Jesus did it. We're looking at the story. Jesus descends into hell and preaches the good news. Hey man, got good news, y'all. I've defeated death. It's lost its sting. We're now stepping into eternal life. Yes, I led the way, but you guys got to come with me. I'm leading captivity captive. Come on, guys. Time to get out. Find gratitude. Go back into those dark places, and it changes your relationship with them. My relationship with those jobs have changed. Now it's a place of gratitude. A job that used to, I can't believe I'm going here again. Another day. Now I'm like, man, thank you. Thank you. My memories and my interactions were beautiful, and they don't exist anymore. Only within my heart is a memory. So we have to change the way that we look at things so that the things that we look at will change. And that's the power of gratitude. Little is much. The cup is half empty. Nah, it's half full. Becoming optimistic. Become optimistic how your state you will achieve. It's so beautiful. This is the process of becoming light, bringing more light and more love to you. And we've shared some very practical things that you can do, but also the grid of which we measure on the spiritual plane of existence, the different bodies, the different beings, angels and demons and darkness and lights and spirals that go up and spirals that go down and levels that correlate on the light and in the darkness. Man, so much of what I've been studying, but to ascend, to bring everything up. Everything in your life gets an upgrade. Spiritually, mentally, financially, all of those places. How? Bringing gratitude. Let gratitude be the fuel that helps you get to those greater levels. Tell me about it. Send me a message, send me an email, get on my inbox, hit me up. I want to know what strides, what steps are you taking that you're able to look back at that past situation and see change. That's what it's about. You gotta have contrast. Those who sat in darkness beheld a great light. I can contrast it. There's empathy there for those in darkness. Like Jesus saw death and he goes down and he's carried the weight of the world, and he brings this message of love and of beauty. It rings true deeper to your core. There's a gratitude. You got to bring it there. And so the contrast exists for a reason. All things, all situations, all beings exist for your greater good, which is for the greater good of the collective, which is for the greater good of the planet, which is for the greater good of the universe and for the cosmos and for all of existence. Be thankful, find gratitude, be mindful. Thank you guys. All right, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody supporting my work via Patreon. This is a listener-supported, listener-funded show. Doesn't exist without your help, man. Thank you to all of the beautiful souls who resonate with this message. I know that it's not falling upon deaf ears. I know that the word is not returning void. For sure, people are sharing, people are supporting, people are sending donations and letting me know that, listen, keep doing this, man. Step it up. Let's keep doing it. Let's evolve it. So thank you guys for believing in the work. It means the world. Thank you. So I'm going to say a huge thank you to some of the following patrons within the last week or so. Shout out to D. Geardis. Thank you so much, D, for coming on. Thank you to Deidra. Great to meet you, my friend. Amazing work that God is doing in your heart. Thank you for being a part of this circle. LaShonda Washington. Thank you, LaShonda, for coming on. Great to have you, my friend. Belinda Bernadette. Great to meet you, Belinda. Welcome to the circle as well. Your support means the world. Thanks. Samantha L. Hello, Samantha. Welcome. Great to have you. Cheryl DiPinto. Thank you, Cheryl, for coming on. Many blessings to you, too. and Daniel Emerson. Great to have you, Daniel. Thank you for coming on at such a high level of support on Patreon, man. Thank you so much. It means the world. Thank you. If you'd like to support, go to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to my entire discography of music, the webinars that we've done in the past. You get access to our Thursday night School of the Mystics, which is the community aspect of what we're building here. Hangout, prayer, meditation, discussion with me in a small community. It's not a lot of people. I don't want to overwhelm people. I think it's like a whole bunch of people. No, small community, just having fun, discussions, rolling ideas, having prayer. Listen, check it out for sure. Thursday night School of Mystics, 7 p.m. Central. Sunday morning, prayer, meditation, discussion, and breathwork. We do that on Sundays as well at 10 a.m. Central. You get access to that. My guided meditations, so much more behind the scenes stuff. Go check it out. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Go to my website, TruthSeekah.com. I've got a book out. You can get my meditation for free there, the Throne Room Meditation. If you haven't heard that, you got to hear it. I guarantee you it's one of the best meditations you've ever heard. And if you have never meditated before and this is new to you, go check it out. It is amazing. It'll change your life for sure. And you can get it for free. TruthSeekah.com. With that being said, I'm going to say peace and shalom. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. It's been a blessing. Shalom. Peace.
Your will so much higher than mine. So much higher than mine. So much deeper than mine. So much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.